This is the LP6 Plus ventilator. And this is the LP10 ventilator. Both are manufactured by Equitron Medical. The difference between the two ventilators is that the LP10 has a pressure limit control. While the LP6 Plus does not. Other than that, the two ventilators are exactly the same in design and operation. The information in the following video applies to both the LP6 Plus and LP10, with the exception of a few brief segments that apply only to the LP10. These LP10 only segments are clearly indicated by a superimposed title. The compact LP10, or the LP6 Plus positive pressure volume ventilator, has been prescribed for your patients. You can feel comfortable and confident working with this ventilator because of its many safety features and proven reliability. The ventilator is flexible enough that the physician can tailor its operation to meet patients' special needs. The ventilator operates on multiple power sources. It runs on standard AC power. A switch on the back enables the unit to operate on either 110 or 220-volt power systems throughout the world. The ventilator operates on external 12-volt batteries, thus giving the patient a great deal of mobility. There's also an internal battery inside the ventilator for emergency backup use. The ventilator is a reliable, safe, smart system. Its functions are controlled by a microprocessor and are calibrated. The ventilator has a reliable system of safety alarms that alert caregivers to life-threatening conditions such as low-pressure apnea, low power, or high pressure. An optional remote alarm monitor allows caregivers to do everyday activities up to 200 feet away from the ventilator while still monitoring the patient. The ventilator can be connected to oxygen sources. It operates quietly. It's easy to maintain. Most importantly, the ventilator is easy to use. The physician has prescribed one of 3 operating modes: assist control, SIMV, or pressure cycle, along with other important parameters. There's also a pressure limit control on the LP10 that enables it to function as a pressure-limited, time-cycled ventilator. This mechanical pressure limit control operates independently of the ventilator's microprocessor. Those are some important features of the LP10 and LP6 Plus. The purpose of this video is to teach clinicians how to work with these ventilators. This video program should be viewed in conjunction with a careful reading of the clinician's manual. Six parameters and controls are located on the ventilator's electronic control panel: volume, breath rate, inspiratory time, breathing effort, the high-pressure alarm limit, and the low-pressure alarm control. The volume control determines the amount of air delivered to the patient. It's a skirted locking knob with continuous settings ranging from 100 to 2200 milliliters. The volume control determines how far the piston travels. This is the distance the piston travels in delivering a volume of 100 milliliters. And here's the distance it travels in delivering a volume of 2200 milliliters. When the volume setting is changed, it changes at a rate of 100 milliliters per machine cycle until the new volume is achieved. In standard applications, the calculation of volume is 8 to 10 milliliters per kilogram of body weight. A kilogram is approximately 2.2 pounds. So, a typical prescribed volume for a patient who weighs 50 kilograms, 110 pounds, is 400 to 500 milliliters. However, note that the calculation of volume changes dramatically in cases in which the pressure limit control on the LP10 is being used as part of the prescribed ventilatory treatment, as will be described later in this video. The breath rate knob sets the number of breaths per minute that the machine will deliver. Breath rates can be set from 1 to 20 breaths per minute in increments of 1, and from 22 to 38 breaths per minute in increments of 2. The ventilator can also be configured to perform controlled autocycling. Controlled autocycling enables the ventilator to deliver breath rates above 38 BPM up to 58 BPM, as will be explained shortly. Inspiratory time determines the rate in seconds of the inspiratory flow of breaths delivered into the patient's lungs. Expiratory time is determined by the breath rate and the inspiratory time setting. Flow rate is a function of the volume and the inspiratory time. The shorter the inspiratory time, the faster the flow rate. The ventilator does not support the use of inverse IE ratios. In other words, it doesn't permit an inspiratory time that's longer than the expiratory time. As a result, the number 30 is an important constant for calculating both the maximum inspiratory times and maximum breath rate. If you know the breath rate, then you can calculate inspiratory times using this formula. 30 divided by the breath rate equals the maximum inspiratory time. For example, if the breath rate setting is 15 breaths per minute, then 30 divided by 15 equals a maximum inspiratory time of 2 seconds. By the same token, if you know the inspiratory time, then you can calculate the maximum breath rate. For example, if the inspiratory time is set at 1.5 seconds, then 30 divided by 1.5 equals a maximum breath rate of 20 breaths per minute. Notice that if an inverse IE ratio is attempted by increasing the inspiratory time to more than the allowed maximum, the setting error alarm sounds. This alarm can only be silenced by bringing the settings back within the correct parameters. The breathing effort control sets the amount of patient effort needed to trigger a machine-delivered breath. It's a skirted locking knob with continuous settings ranging from negative 10 centimeters to positive 10 centimeters of pressure. 0 is atmospheric pressure. When the patient's breathing effort equals or exceeds the pressure that you've set, the breathing effort light flashes. Notice that there are positive breathing effort settings above 0. These are for situations where PEEP, positive end expiratory pressure, has been prescribed for the patient. The ventilator is not PEEP compensated. However, PEEP can be achieved by attaching the prescribed PEEP valve to the patient's circuit, and then by selecting the prescribed breathing effort setting. Any PEEP valve requires that you set the breathing effort control to a positive value. However, if PEEP valves aren't used, then a breathing effort setting above 0 may cause the machine to autocycle. In other words, to initiate breaths by itself, without any patient effort. So, if you're not using a PEEP valve, make sure the effort control is set to a negative value. As mentioned before, there may be some special applications in which we want to use the breathing effort control to achieve a controlled auto-cycling of the ventilator so it can deliver more than the guaranteed 38 breaths per minute. Controlled auto-cycling is useful for patients who lack sufficient spontaneous breathing effort and require higher breath rates, up to 58 BPM. Controlled auto-cycling is accomplished by setting the breathing effort control to a positive value that makes the ventilator think that the patient is triggering a breath, when in fact there is no patient breathing effort. For example, suppose we want to set the breath rate to 50 BPM with a starting volume of 200 milliliters. To calculate the inspiratory rate needed to support this higher breath rate, use the formula IT equals 30 over a breath rate of 50. This calculation indicates it will require an inspiratory time of 3/5 equals 6/10 of a second in order to achieve a rate of 50 BPM. Once the inspiratory time and appropriate volume are set, turn the breathing effort knob to a positive value until the green light flashes at regular intervals, indicating that the ventilator is doing controlled auto-cycling. Check the resulting breath rate by either timing the ventilator or by looking at the digital display. The high alarm limit control is for setting high pressure limit points for the patient. Settings range from 15 to 90 centimeters of pressure in increments of 5 centimeters. In both assist control and SIMV modes of ventilation, when the patient pressure meets the high alarm limit point, the high pressure alarm sounds. Volume delivery automatically stops. The piston withdraws, and excess pressure is vented from the patient circuit. In the pressure cycle mode, when the patient pressure meets the high alarm limit point, volume delivery automatically stops and expiration immediately begins. The piston withdraws. Excess pressure is vented from the circuit, but there isn't any high pressure alarm. However, in pressure cycle mode, if for any reason patient pressure builds to exceed the high alarm limit by 10 centimeters of pressure, the high pressure alarm does sound, alerting caregivers to a situation that requires their immediate attention. The low alarm control sets the low pressure limit point. This limit can be set from 2 to 32 centimeters of pressure in increments of 2. Here, the low pressure limit is set at 24 centimeters of pressure. After 2 consecutive breaths fail to achieve this low pressure setting, the low pressure alarm sounds, alerting caregivers to a situation that requires immediate attention. Because it's both an audible and visual latching alarm, the low pressure alarm must be manually reset even after the condition has been corrected. In setting the low alarm limit, consider whether your setting will allow the ventilator to alarm if these conditions occur. Will a low pressure apnea alarm activate in the event of a disconnect with a hydrated artificial nose still attached to the circuit? Will a low pressure apnea alarm activate if the patient is decannulated with a tracheostomy tube still attached to the circuit? The LP10 has a pressure limit control. It's a mechanical control that works independently of the microprocessor. The purpose of the pressure limit control is to provide a means of limiting and maintaining plateaued pressure over a specific period of time. The pressure limit control can only be used in conjunction with the assist control or SIMV modes of ventilation, as will be explained in the next video segment. Those are the parameters and controls that are located on the ventilator's electronic control panel, and also the mechanical pressure limit control, which is only on the LP10. To complete this section on parameters, read the appropriate pages in the clinician's manual. In this video segment, you'll learn about modes of ventilation. The ventilators can be set to one of 6 modes: standby, assist control with pressure limit, pressure cycle, SIMV synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation, and SIMV with pressure limit control. A set screw on the front panel is used for calibrating the patient pressure meter. Check to see that the meter points to -10 when the ventilator is turned off. When the ventilator is turned off, all functions are turned off, including battery charging. We recommend that when the ventilator isn't being used, the mode switch be set to the standby position, with the power switch in back turned on. This ensures that the internal battery is charging. In the assist control mode, the ventilator either assists or controls patient breathing, depending on the patient's own breathing efforts. Assist occurs when the patient's breathing effort equals or exceeds the breathing effort setting. The machine delivers a breath at the preset volume. In assist mode, the machine completes patient-initiated breathing efforts. Patients receive assisted breaths from the machine as often as they're able to initiate them. Whenever the patient's breathing effort is insufficient, or whenever there's no breathing effort, then the ventilator takes control and delivers a breath to the patient. When the breath rate setting is 6 breaths per minute or greater, the ventilator operates in the control mode. It delivers the set rate and volume until the patient resumes a sufficient level of breathing effort. However, when the breath rate setting is less than 6 breaths per minute, and the patient makes no breathing effort, the low-pressure apnea alarm sounds within 10 seconds, and the unit automatically delivers 10 breaths per minute at the preset volume. The next mode is assist control with pressure limit, which is only possible with the LP10. To understand the pressure limit control, we need to distinguish between volume and pressure. Volume is what the machine gives based on the prescribed volume parameter. Pressure, on the other hand, is the result of delivering this volume into the patient's lung after the air has traveled through an optional humidifier, the patient circuit, the exhalation manifold, and the trach connection. For any given volume, pressures may vary enormously, depending on varying amounts of leaking in the path the air follows to reach the lung. Therefore, the pressure limit control is often used with children and any uncuffed airway patient population as a way of compensating for the varying degrees of leaking that actually occur. When pressure reaches the limit point set by the pressure limit control, excess volume is bled off in order to maintain the prescribed pressure level. The volume that is bled off is released through the pressure limit valve on the front panel. However, the ventilator goes through its full cycle. As a result, extended or plateaued pressures are provided to the patient for the entire prescribed inspiratory time. This waveform shows both volume and pressure. It's a waveform of the assist control mode without pressure limit control. Notice how pressure and volume both build to a peak and then drop. Now, superimposed over this is a waveform of the same mode with pressure limit control. Notice how the pressure builds to the limit point, and then it plateaus for a period of time as determined by the inspiratory time setting. Also note that all excess volume above the pressure limit point is bled off. In order to maintain prescribed pressures using the pressure limit control, the volume is typically set much higher than it is for applications that don't use this feature. The calculation of volume when pressure limit control is being used is 18 milliliters per kilogram of body weight. A kilogram is approximately 2.2 pounds. As a result, the typical prescribed volume for a patient who weighs 50 kilograms, 110 pounds, is 900 milliliters. To set the pressure limit control, disconnect the LP10 from the patient and provide another means of ventilation. Turn the ventilator on. Push in the outer locking ring and turn the adjustment knob all the way counterclockwise. This opens the valve all the way. Make sure all controls are set to the prescribed settings. Block the flow of air at the port that connects to the patient on the exhalation manifold. While observing the pressure meter, turn the pressure limit control clockwise in small increments each breath until the pressure meter reaches but does not exceed the pressure limit point prescribed by the physician, which in this case is 30 centimeters. When this pressure limit is reached, Observe the pressure meter for several ventilator cycles to verify stable operation. Finally, reconnect the patient to the LP10. Now let's look at the pressure cycle mode. This mode is typically used with patients who cannot tolerate pressures over long periods of time, cases in which strictly limiting the buildup of pressure in the patient's lungs is a key ventilatory factor. In pressure cycle mode, when the high pressure limit point is reached, the piston withdraws. Excess pressure is immediately vented from the circuit, and the machine cycles to expiration. But it doesn't sound an alarm, because in pressure cycle mode, reaching the high pressure limit point is considered a normal breathing function. However, pressure cycle mode doesn't want pressure to go above the limit point. If for any reason pressure in the system builds up to a level of 10 centimeters of pressure above the high limit point, then the high pressure safety alarm sounds, alerting caregivers to a situation requiring immediate attention. Let's compare pressure cycle mode with the pressure limit control. Pressure cycle is a mode which can be selected to control the internal operation of either the LP6 Plus or the LP10. Pressure limit is a mechanical valve found only on the LP10. It is used in conjunction with either assist control or SIMV modes. It doesn't affect the internal operation of the ventilator, but instead acts independently as a mechanical valve in limiting pressure. Pressure cycle mode strictly limits the duration of pressure buildup in the patient's lungs, as shown by this waveform. The pressure limit control, on the other hand, maintains plateaued pressure over the entire period of the delivered breath, as shown by this waveform. Synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation is a mode which permits patients to breathe on their own between mandatory machine-delivered breaths. In SIMV, a microprocessor-controlled breathing window opens at regular intervals based on the breath rate setting. If the patient makes a sufficient breathing effort during the time the window is open, the window closes and the machine delivers an assisted breath. Any patient breath that occurs when the window is closed is an independent breath by the patient's efforts alone and is not assisted. Again, the patient makes a sufficient breathing effort while the window is open. The window closes as the machine provides an assisted breath. In SIMV, the machine senses the patient's breathing efforts and synchronizes its mandatory breathing with the patient's efforts. Here, in this example, the patient begins an independent breath just before the window opens. The ventilator senses this, and in order to avoid breath stacking, it doesn't provide a breath. It keeps the window open until the patient makes a sufficient breathing effort, and it provides an assisted breath. In SIMV, with the breath rate set at 6 breaths per minute or greater, if the patient doesn't initiate a sufficient breathing effort during the time the window is open, the machine delivers a mandatory breath at the beginning of the next window. Again, the patient makes no breathing effort, so the machine provides another mandatory breath, and it keeps the window open until the patient makes a sufficient breathing effort and receives an assisted breath. In SIMV, if the breath rate is set to less than 6 breaths per minute, and the patient makes no breathing effort, the low-pressure apnea alarm sounds within 20 seconds, and the unit automatically delivers 10 breaths per minute at the preset volume. The last mode is SIMV with pressure limit control. This mode is possible only with the LP10. In this mode, the LP10 functions as shown in the SIMV mode. The only difference is that the mechanical pressure limit control limits pressure during delivered breaths. To complete this section on modes of ventilation, read the appropriate pages in your clinician's manual. The LP10 and LP6 Plus operate on 3 different power sources, so it's important to understand how these sources work. For home or hospital use, The unit should be powered from a standard 110-volt grounded AC power outlet. The ventilator can be configured to operate on other voltages and currents, so it can be used throughout the world. If a two-prong outlet is being used for AC power, only use a UL-listed adapter, and make sure to properly ground the third-wire electrical ground. For use with a wheelchair or in a vehicle, a 12-volt external battery is the ventilator's source of power. Under optimum conditions, a fully charged 75 to 80 amp-hour deep-cycle battery can power the ventilator for up to 20 hours. Whenever you hook up an external battery, make sure the red wire, marked plus, is connected to the positive terminal of the battery, and that the black negative wire is connected to the negative terminal. Place the battery in a non-sealed plastic container. Plug the battery cable into the external battery connection on the back of the ventilator and turn off the AC power. The power indicator lights show the switch from AC power to external battery, and the power switchover alarm sounds. The ventilator doesn't efficiently charge up external batteries. For this reason, Equitron recommends the use of a standard 12-volt battery charger to recharge external batteries after every use. Never connect a battery charger to an external battery if the battery is connected at the same time to the ventilator. During transport, the ventilator can be powered by an optional cigarette lighter adapter, which draws power from the car's battery. It's very important that the vehicle is running before plugging in the adapter. If an adapter connected to a ventilator is mistakenly plugged in first, and then the car is started, it could damage the ventilator. The internal battery in the ventilator is intended for transport and for short-term emergencies, such as temporary interruptions of AC power. Notice that when there's a loss of AC power, the power switchover alarm sounds, and the flashing light shows that the unit's operating on internal battery. Under optimum conditions, the ventilator can operate up to 1 hour on a fully charged internal battery. The amber light flashes continuously. During approximately the first 45 to 55 minutes, there's a single-tone reminder alarm every 5 minutes, reminding caregivers that the unit's running on internal battery. When there are approximately 5 minutes of charge left on the internal battery, the low power alarm sounds continuously, signaling that caregivers must immediately switch to another power source or provide another means of ventilation. When prescribed, keep a fully charged external battery on hand as a backup power source. Also make sure there's an alternative means of ventilation. To check the amount of power left in either the internal or external battery, make sure the unit's disconnected from AC power and the unit's being powered by the battery source you want to test. Press and hold the battery test button and check the battery status window. A fully charged battery in good condition will register in the normal or medium range. Keep in mind that this battery status window is only an indicator of the charge level at the moment. It's not a reliable indicator of how much operating time is left in the battery. Older batteries may register a high charge, but then discharge very rapidly. When the unit is plugged into AC power and turned on, it automatically charges the internal battery in any mode, including standby. Make sure to recharge the internal battery immediately after every use. To conclude this section, turn to your clinician's manual and read the section on power sources. In this segment, you'll learn how to hook up the patient circuit and ventilator accessories. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions when hooking up the patient circuit to the ventilator. The flex tube connects at one end to the patient's trach tube. At the other end, it connects to the exhalation manifold. The exhalation manifold directs the flow of gases to and from the patient during inhalation and exhalation. Hold it so the small port points back toward the ventilator and not toward the patient. The exhalation manifold connects to the patient air hose. At the other end, the patient air hose connects to a bacteria filter which helps clean the air before it's delivered to the patient. Then the patient air hose and bacteria filter connect to the patient air port on the ventilator. The small patient pressure tubing connects the proximal port on the exhalation manifold to the patient pressure port on the ventilator. The other small tube connects the port on top of the exhalation manifold to the exhalation valve port on the ventilator. If humidification is prescribed, some humidifier models mount on the side of the ventilator through the use of special mounting brackets. Disconnect the patient air circuit from the ventilator. Use a flexible hose to connect the bacteria filter to the inlet port on the humidifier. Then connect the patient air circuit to the outlet port of the humidifier. Connect the temperature probe to the base of the humidifier, to the outlet port of the humidifier, and to the patient circuit. Humidification may result in water building up in the patient circuit. It is critical that this liquid doesn't reach the patient. So, if the patient is sitting upright, position the humidifier so it's at a level below the patient's trach. And when the patient is lying in bed, make sure the circuit is configured so that at some point it drops below the level of the patient's trach. Make sure to follow the routine safety checklist before connecting a patient to the ventilator. Next, do the self-test. On the LP10, the pressure limit control has to be completely closed. Turn the ventilator on-off switch on. Block the port that goes to the patient on the exhalation manifold with your hand. At the same time, hold in the alarm reset and battery test buttons and switch from standby to assist control. While keeping the end of the circuit blocked, release the alarm reset and battery test buttons. The ventilator does a leak test. It also does a high-pressure check to see the pressure relief valve is opening properly. If you get a low-pressure apnea alarm or a high-pressure alarm or both alarms, check the entire system for leaks. Then reperform the self-test. If you continue getting alarms on the self-test, call your home care dealer or Equitron technical service representative. If you don't get any alarms on the self-test, it means that the ventilator and circuit are working properly. Connect the flex tube to the patient's trach connection. Optionally, an inline artificial nose can be used for passive humidification of the patient during transport or other short-term uses. Hooking up the ventilator may involve using other optional accessories, such as supplemental oxygen. Concentrations of up to 40% oxygen can be bled into the patient's circuit by use of an optional oxygen elbow. Concentrations of up to 100% can be delivered into the ventilator's inlet port by use of an oxygen enrichment kit. A remote alarm can be used at distances up to 200 feet from the ventilator. A variety of optional printers can be used to record detailed information documenting the performance of the ventilator. Also, an optional digital display is available showing exact readings for volume, breath rate, IE ratio, peak pressure, inspiratory flow, and other operating parameters. Always follow manufacturer's instructions when hooking up the humidifier and other accessories. To conclude this section, turn to your clinician's manual and review the appropriate pages on the patient's circuit, exhalation manifold, humidification, and supplemental oxygen. In this video segment, you'll learn about alarms. The ventilator has a number of reliable safety alarms to alert caregivers to critical conditions. Most of the alarms are pulsating audible alarms with flashing lights to indicate low pressure apnea, low power, high pressure, setting error, and power switchover. All ventilator alarms are visual latching alarms. In addition, the low pressure apnea, low power, and power switchover alarms are both audible and visual latching alarms. This means that even though these alarm conditions may be corrected, the lights continue to flash and the audible alarms stay on until the caregiver presses the alarm silence reset button. This added safety feature assures that caregivers will check on the patient whenever these alarms occur. The low-pressure apnea alarm indicates an urgent condition. The patient may not be receiving enough air. Act quickly. Check the patient first. Then check for loose and disconnected tubing, water in the proximal pressure line, low-pressure alarm settings below the PEEP valve setting, or leaks in the patient circuit. Both audible and visual alarms will continue until reset. The low power alarm indicates that the internal battery is low. Caregivers must immediately switch to another power source or provide another means of ventilation. When AC power is restored, immediately recharge the internal battery. The high pressure alarm indicates a blockage or other condition has increased pressure in the system beyond prescribed parameters. Check for blockages in the circuit, including the pressure limit valve on the LP10. Suction the patient airway if necessary. The setting error alarm indicates that the controls are set in a way which is not within the capabilities of the ventilator. Check the control settings to see they haven't been switched from what the physician has prescribed. If there's an attached printer, reference the printer manual for possible causes. Also, check to see that the air intake filter hasn't been blocked. The power switchover alarm sounds every time the ventilator is switched from a longer-term power source to a shorter-term source. It sounds when the unit is switched from AC power to external battery, or from external battery to internal battery. However, when power is switched from a shorter term to a longer term source, the power switchover alarm does not sound. As shown before, if the unit is being powered by the internal battery, there's a single tone alarm every 5 minutes to remind the caregiver. Whenever the unit's turned on, all alarms activate for 3 or 4 seconds. This is a test the unit performs to verify that the alarms and LEDs are working. A steady audible alarm and steady lights indicate a possible microprocessor error has been detected by the ventilator. This alarm may be reset by turning the mode to standby and then turning the ventilator off for a few seconds and then back on. If the microprocessor alarm doesn't reset, then an alternative means of ventilation must immediately be provided to the patient. Remember, all alarms indicate a potential risk to the patient's safety. When an alarm sounds, provide immediate attention and support to the patient. Then check the alarm lights on the ventilator to identify the source of the problem. Make sure caregivers understand that they should call their home care dealer or Equitron technical service representative if assistance is required. To conclude this section, turn to your clinician's manual and read the pages on responding to alarms. This video segment will discuss cleaning and preventive maintenance. Equipment that isn't cleaned and disinfected has the possibility of infecting the patient. Patient circuits need to be inspected every day and cleaned frequently, following manufacturer's instructions. The bacteria filter should also be checked frequently and replaced when needed. The inlet filter should be changed on a weekly basis, or daily if the ventilator is being used outdoors or in transport. If the filter is dirty, replace it with a new filter. Preventive maintenance needs to be performed on the ventilators after every 6,000 hours of operation, or 1 year, whichever comes first. To check the number of actual operating hours, press the alarm reset and battery test buttons at the same time. Anytime the needle points to 30 or greater, contact your home care dealer for service. To calculate the total number of hours, multiply the meter reading by 200. In this case, the reading is 12. 12 times 200 equals 2,400 hours that this ventilator has been in operation since the last PM. To conclude this section, turn to your clinician's manual and read the pages on cleaning and maintenance. This final segment is a summary. Before connecting the patient to the ventilator, caregivers should use the routine safety checklist to see that the unit's working properly and that the controls are set to match the physician's prescription. Caregivers should check the ventilator's performance every month using the monthly safety checklist. Make sure to follow the manufacturer's instructions for hooking up any accessories. We hope this program has been useful in teaching you how to use the LP10 and LP6 Plus to treat your patients. If you have any questions, please contact your Equitron representative.